Our Pew Research Center has estimated that any incarceration rate over 350 per 100,000 starts creating diminishing returns, and over 500 per 100,000 becomes actually counterproductive. You're adding to the crime rather than detracting from it. That's at 500 per 100,000. Our incarceration rate in the United States is over 700 and some per 100,000. And in minority communities in some states, it has 4,000 per 100,000. What role does DEA policy play in over-incarceration and the racial disparity, and what is DEA doing about it?
Thank you, Ranking Member. I can tell you that the Drug Enforcement Administration, our mission is really go after the world's biggest and baddest drug traffickers. We spend our resources, our work hours going after the largest drug traffickers, the sources of supply, the heads of organizations and the heads of drug cartels, the heads of trafficking organizations, transportation organizations, those that most impact the drug supply on the United States. For instance,
well, has the DEA, any DEA policy contributed to over-incarceration and the racial disparity?
Well, there are federal drug laws that DEA enforces. You as Congress, you set the laws, we enforce the federal laws. We go where our intelligence takes us. We go where the evidence takes us.
Well, what is the policy of the DEA on mandatory minimums? They've been studied and found to be discriminatory and ineffective in reducing crime. What is the DEA policy on mandatory minimums?
There is no policy for DEA on minimum mandatories. We go where the evidence is. If someone is trafficking drugs, we investigate that. So we investigate their organization.
You don't have a position supporting mandatory minimums as a crime-fighting tool, since they've been found to be discriminatory and a waste of money and ineffective in reducing crime. You don't have a position on mandatory minimums?
We do our investigations. We conduct our operations without regard to the sentencing. But the Department of Justice was very...
Well, in terms of sentencing, when you're dealing with local, state, and federal task forces, there are allegations that some of the task force results have been referred to federal court and some are referred to state court. Federal court where you have the draconian mandatory minimums have been shown to have a discriminatory impact because all the crack cases get sent to federal court where you can get 5 years mandatory minimum, and meth cases tend to be tried in state court where they're not subject to those kinds of mandatory minimums. Is that DEA policy?
That is not DEA policy. Again, we bring our most significant cases to federal court. We bring the sources of supply and those responsible for the drug supply on the streets of the United States and much of the violence.